Happy Wealth Wednesday. Dani, so excited to have you here to talk about ULO and all things crypto, metaverse, and the exciting projects that you are part of. So thank you for joining. Would love if you would just share a bit about who you are, where you're from, and what you're up to.
Thanks, Alana. And I'm a huge fan of Eve Wealth, as you know, early adopter. Um, Born and raised in LA, first generation American. So I've been in the VR, AR space since 2016. And before starting my company, ULO, I worked at Snapchat, leading the augmented reality creator community. But yeah, really seen an incredible opportunity to develop the experience economy and really the spaces and places in the metaverse through ULO. So we're developing a community-driven metaverse development company.
So cool. I can't wait to dive into like all the things that that means. I know we always get questions, but like, what is the metaverse and can there be multiple metaverses and all the fun stuff? So we can dive into that. And one of the first questions I always try to ask is, do you remember what your first ever investment was, whether it was the crypto space or otherwise, and who got you started?
Yeah, I think it was Tesla, actually. I was in college and I actually took a semester off to think about my career beyond like studying. And I started investing in different stocks, and Tesla was one of them. I was just fascinated by the brand and the idea of an electric car. I don't know much more beyond that, but I just really resonated with this from a consumer standpoint, and I decided to buy some stock.
So cool. And did you already know how to buy stocks? Like, how did that even go as a process for you?
Oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember. No, I definitely didn't know. I'm pretty sure I asked around a lot and some people showed me how, maybe my parents. But I think, I wouldn't have done that if I didn't have the space to really think about, what do I want my career to be and like how do I make money beyond being in a classroom and like following a specific path. I just took a semester off and started working for different startups and kind of interning places to really understand what I wanted my career to be.
So cool. And so, how and why did you end up getting into this space, into VR and metaverse?
Yeah, I think, if I really think back pretty far, I grew up in a family of artists and entrepreneurs. So both my parents are filmmakers. And so I grew up in this like really creative household, but I personally was always fascinated by entrepreneurship and especially tech entrepreneurship and the idea that you can envision something and then literally just create it like magic. And so when I started my career, it was very tech focused, but I realized that that creative element was missing. And so when I tried virtual reality a couple years out of school, I kind of played with a few different artists, created VR experiences, and I just fell in love with the creative potential that these new technologies unlock. And that was sort of the rest was history at that point. Just kind of really evolving as immersive tech has evolved. Now today it's metaverse, and the frontier is decentralized, but it wasn't always like that. It was kind of an early form of that, and it was more centralized.
I love it. And I know you talk a lot about the creator space, and I'd love to understand what you feel like is your role in the wealth space, like in building new models for wealth, and why you think it's important.
Yeah, I think what's really exciting to me about Web3, amongst many things, is the future of work element. And this idea that as a creator or an entrepreneur, you can kind of set your own hours, choose the projects you want to work on, and make an amazing living doing that, right? Rather than being necessarily on a corporate path, which is great for a lot of people, but also not a lot for others. So when I left school, one of my biggest goals was never to get a real job. I ended up working at Snap, but I was kind of an entrepreneur there. And I'm really grateful for that experience. But I think just providing that opportunity to so many creators and entrepreneurial types is something I'm really passionate about and something that Web3s, I think, can really enable and unlock.
Amazing. And so, as you've been building out now metaverse spaces and really being an early adopter, right, and what startups, agencies, creation can look like in the space, what do you think has been one of the most exciting things that you've learned that you would want others to know?
The thing that comes to mind, and I don't know if this exactly answers your question, but it's just this mindset shift that I'm still, I think we're all still trying to adopt because it's so hard to wrap our head around. And I feel like you, Alana, have done a really good job of this. But it's this idea of like, when you think about decentralization, it's this idea of like planting a seed and then that seed like expanding and multiplying, 10, 100, 1,000 fold, right? And so all of a sudden this seed or idea that you plant can actually expand exponentially. And it's not like you put in this small amount of work and then you get a small output. It's like small amount of work, huge output. And just trying to like really crack that and figure out how that can work. Of course, from an idea standpoint, it's incredible. Now it's like implementation, right? So I'm just constantly learning how to adopt that mentality and the process to make that a reality.
I love that. And is there a person or a company that inspires you that's doing that well or in the space more broadly?
Yeah, there's a company that I came across yesterday that I'm really excited about. Doesn't completely relate to that, but it's called Third Web, and they're basically creating a no-code tools around smart contract development, marketplace development, like to the point where you could rebuild OpenSea in like a day or two. And I
Mhm.
think that's just incredibly empowering because it removes the barrier to entry into the NFT space immensely. So yeah, I'm just like really excited about that platform, that tool personally.
Super cool. And what advice would you give to somebody getting started, especially in this concept of the metaverse?
Yeah, I think with Web3 and Metaverse, it can be pretty overwhelming. So I think it's very important to like take the time to study and learn what's happening before just diving in because it requires quite a significant mentality shift. And I think kind of getting in the weeds, rolling up your sleeves, becoming a collector, right? Buying, you don't need a lot of money, buy some NFTs, spend some time in Sandbox, like walk the walk and then kind of form your thesis. But even though it feels like the space moves so fast, I think it's very important to uh, roll up your sleeves and take your time really understanding, learning, and digging in yourself from a consumer or collector standpoint.
I love that. And for anyone who's new, like how do you define the metaverse? Like what is the metaverse in your definition?
Yeah, my friend Evan Helda, who's working on AWS's like metaverse tools, summed it up really well in his South by panel. So he talked about this shift on the front end and back end of technology, right? On the front end, we're shifting from a 2D to 3D environment and interface. And on the back end, we're shifting from a centralized to decentralized ecosystem. And to me, that really sums up the metaverse because it's not just about, oh, we're experiencing the world, this virtual world in a more immersive way. It's also about this idea of like decentralization taking over. And I think that's a major difference in what the metaverse is today versus even like 3 years ago, where it was viewed as a more centralized kind of 3D world. So
I love that. And one of the coolest questions I had got from the Eve community at one point was, how can a very centralized company like Facebook, for example, have a metaverse and or own the metaverse, or is there more than one? Can you just touch a little bit on that concept and how you think about it?
yeah, I mean, I think we're still figuring it out, but I think the metaverse, if you were to kind of define it as what I just shared, it's more of it's a much greater thing, right, than like each individual world. So I think there definitely has to be a term for the worlds within this greater concept of the metaverse.
Mhm.
And I think it's okay that we have not fully defined what the metaverse is or understand because it hasn't happened yet. Um, but yeah, I think like all these different worlds that are popping up, whether it's Sandbox or what Yuga Labs is building, or a tiny little world that is DAO has created, right? At some point, they're all going to have to be interconnected. We don't know what that exactly that's going to look like, but I think the metaverse is this like larger umbrella concept that's still being defined every day.
I love that. I like how you explained the difference of like front end and back end because they may be connected by a decentralized protocol, like the transactions could happen across like common infrastructure. And they could all be using different like front end tools for their world building. And I think that's so cool. So thank you so much for sharing all of this. Is there anything else you'd want us to know? How can we keep in touch with what you're doing with Ulo and follow your journey as a founder?
Yes, definitely follow at ULO_world on Twitter. If you're interested or curious about the experience economy, real estate, architecture as it relates to the metaverse, definitely follow us on our journey. And yeah, just I love Eve, love what you're doing. I think it's so important. And yeah, just important not to get overwhelmed with all this stuff because I think there's, it's a lot. So like taking it a day at a time and kind of enjoying the process of learning all about Web3 is very important and investing.
Well, thank you for sharing your story and putting a real face to a concept that can seem crazy like the metaverse, and just being an inspirational founder to know that like we don't have all the answers, and part of the fun of it is evolving as they emerge. So thank you so much, Dani, and so appreciate you. We'll definitely be following along.
Thank you.